Subscribe to Keep It Terrifying for creepy tales, horror, and nightmares you won't forget. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button and keep it terrifying.
Part 1, The Final Year. Jill's heart pounded in her chest as she walked through the halls of Fairview High for the last time. The lockers, the familiar smell of chalk dust and textbooks, the chatter of students still milling about, all seemed distant now, as though they belonged to a world she would soon leave behind. It was the day of graduation, the culmination of 12 years of schooling, and yet, for Jill, the excitement was missing. Instead, a gnawing sense of unease had settled deep in her stomach, a feeling that something was wrong. Something off. She pushed the thought aside. Graduation was supposed to be a moment of triumph, a celebration of everything she had worked for. The future was waiting for her: college, independence, freedom. But why did she feel so heavy? Why did the air feel thick, like it was pressing in on her, suffocating her? Jill, a voice called from behind her, pulling her from her thoughts. She turned to see her best friend, Carla, walking toward her, her smile wide and infectious. Carla was always the upbeat one, the one who loved the pomp and circumstance of every occasion, who couldn't wait to leave high school behind. But even her enthusiasm seemed a little forced today. "You okay?" Carla asked, her gaze lingering on Jill's expression. "You've been looking a little off all morning." Jill forced a smile. "I'm fine. Just a little nervous, I guess." Carla gave her a knowing look. "I get it. But hey, we're done. We made it. After today, no more homework, no more tests, just freedom." Jill nodded, but the weight on her chest didn't lift. She glanced around the hallway, half expecting to see someone or something watching her. A strange feeling of being observed had been creeping up on her ever since she woke up this morning. It was probably just nerves. It had to be. "Come on," Carla said, nudging her with her elbow. "Let's go before they start the ceremony without us. We're sitting together, right?" Jill nodded absent-mindedly, following Carla down the hall toward the gymnasium. The buzz of excitement grew louder as they neared the entrance, the murmur of classmates, the shuffle of robes and caps. But Jill couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The air felt too heavy, like a storm was waiting to break. As they entered the gym, Jill's eyes scanned the crowd, her gaze flitting over familiar faces, all wearing the same nervous excitement. The gym was decorated with the usual graduation banners and balloons, but the usual sense of accomplishment felt strangely absent to Jill. She was almost to the bleachers when she saw it. In the far corner of the gym, near the stage, a figure stood, obscured in shadow. At first, she thought it was just a trick of the lighting, but then the figure moved, as if beckoning her. Her breath caught in her throat. "Jill." Carla's voice cut through her thoughts. "You okay?" Jill blinked and looked back at her friend, shaking her head. Yeah, just nothing." Part 2, The Figure in the Shadows. Jill's heart raced as she took her seat in the bleachers, trying to push the image of the shadowy figure to the back of her mind. She scanned the gym again, but the corner where she had seen the figure was empty now, the shadows swallowed by the bright lights hanging overhead. It was probably just her imagination. Graduation nerves, she told herself. She was just overtired, perhaps. Carla sat down beside her, still talking excitedly about college and their plans for the summer, but Jill couldn't focus. Her mind kept wandering back to that figure. Had it been real? She tried to tell herself it had been a trick of the light, or perhaps someone she didn't recognize. But something about it gnawed at her, an unease that refused to settle. The principal's voice rang out over the loudspeaker, calling for everyone to stand for the ceremony to begin. Jill shook herself from her thoughts and stood up with the rest of the graduating class. The crowd around her buzzed with nervous energy, the murmurs of excited chatter filling the air. She adjusted her cap and gown, feeling the fabric weigh heavily on her shoulders, and followed the rest of her classmates as they lined up to take their places on the stage. The familiar faces, the smiles, the nervous fidgets, everything felt surreal. This was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, but instead, Jill felt as if she were moving through a dream, detached from the reality around her. As she walked toward the stage, her eyes again flicked to the far corner of the gym, the spot where she had seen the figure moments before. To her surprise, the shadowy figure was there again, standing just at the edge of the stage, half hidden behind the curtains. This time, Jill's heart skipped a beat. The figure didn't move, but she could feel its presence as if it were an anchor, pulling her attention toward it. It was as if someone, or something, was waiting for her. "Jill, stop daydreaming," Carla whispered, nudging her as they climbed the steps to the stage. Jill didn't reply. Her mind was racing, her body tense as she took her place alongside the others, waiting for the ceremony to begin. Her eyes stayed locked on the shadowy figure, unable to tear herself away. The figure didn't move, but Jill could feel its eyes on her. She could feel it watching her, its presence a dark weight pressing against her chest. She knew she had to look away, had to focus on the ceremony, but she couldn't. She felt an odd compulsion, a need to understand. The principal took the microphone, his voice booming across the gym as he welcomed everyone and began the speeches. Jill's focus wavered, her mind still on the figure. It wasn't until the first student walked across the stage to receive their diploma that Jill's thoughts finally shattered. A sudden, sharp pang of fear shot through her chest. The figure, it wasn't just standing there anymore. It was moving. Jill's breath caught as she watched it step out from the shadows and into the dim light of the gym. It was tall, its form indistinct, shrouded in the same darkness. Jill couldn't make out its features, but something in the air felt wrong. Her heart hammered in her chest. Why was she the only one noticing this? Carla elbowed her again. "Hey, Jill, you okay? You're staring. Are you nervous?" Jill swallowed, her throat dry. "Yeah, just tired." But the words felt hollow in her mouth. She wasn't just tired. She was terrified. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to turn around, to face the crowd, to pretend that nothing was wrong. But the figure, it was closer now, standing at the edge of the stage, just out of sight, as though it were waiting for its moment. Then, it happened. The figure moved with unnatural speed, crossing the distance between the shadows and the stage in the blink of an eye. Jill gasped, but before she could react, it reached out a hand toward her. In that instant, her vision flashed white-hot, as if the world around her had been torn open. The figure was in front of her, so close she could feel the coldness radiating from it. Its hand was hovering in mid-air, inches from her face. A voice, no more than a whisper, scraped against her mind. "You should have never come." Jill's heart lurched as a sudden jolt of terror flooded her veins. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. The world around her began to warp and stretch, as though the very fabric of reality was unraveling. She tried to move, but her body refused to obey, locked in place by the unnatural grip of whatever this thing was. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the figure was gone. The moment it vanished, the gymnasium returned to normal. The noise of the ceremony, the applause, the shifting of students, everything was back to its routine. But Jill could feel it. That unnatural weight, that pressure in the air, still lingered. Her pulse raced, and her skin crawled with the sense that she wasn't alone, that something was watching her, waiting. She blinked, trying to shake off the dizziness, the overwhelming sense of wrongness. She could still feel the cold touch of the figure's hand, still hear its voice whispering in her mind. "You should have never come." "Jill, you're up," Carla said, her voice sharp, snapping Jill back to reality. "They're calling your name. Don't mess this up." Jill nodded absently, her legs unsteady as she made her way to the stage. Her mind was still reeling, still trying to understand what had just happened. Was she hallucinating? Was it the stress of the day, the anxiety of the ceremony? She had to focus, had to make it through this moment. But with every step toward the stage, the sensation of being followed, being watched, grew stronger. As she took her place, the principal handed her the diploma, his smile warm, his hand firm in hers. But it wasn't enough to calm the storm brewing in her mind. She couldn't ignore the feeling anymore, the feeling that something terrible was about to happen. Something was wrong. Something had already happened. And Jill knew, with a cold certainty, that graduation wasn't going to be the end. It was just the beginning. Part 3, The Aftermath. The moment Jill stepped off the stage, the applause of the crowd felt distant, muffled, as if it were happening in another world. The weight of the diploma in her hands was heavy, but not in the way it should have been. Instead of pride, she felt a cold, hollow emptiness, a gnawing feeling that had nothing to do with the ceremony or her accomplishments. Her head buzzed with the echoes of that voice, the whisper that had scraped against her mind, "You should have never come." She staggered back to her seat, her legs trembling. Carla was already talking to someone else, her attention elsewhere, but Jill barely noticed. Her thoughts were consumed by the event that had just transpired. The figure, its unnatural speed, its cold, empty touch, everything about it felt wrong. Her hand instinctively went to her neck, feeling the hairs stand on end. The crowd around her seemed to move in slow motion, their smiles wide, their movements fluid, like actors in a play, performing for an audience. "I'm losing my mind," Jill thought, desperately trying to shake the sense of disconnection. "Jill! Over here!" Carla waved at her excitedly, bringing Jill back to the present. She glanced over, and forced a weak smile, but her eyes flickered nervously toward the corner where the figure had stood. The spot was now empty, but that didn't mean it was gone. As she walked toward Carla, she noticed something that hadn't been there before. A dark, subtle stain on her gown, just below the shoulder. It was small, barely noticeable, but the dark spot stood in stark contrast against the pale fabric of her gown. Her stomach twisted. Had that always been there? "Are you sure you're okay?" Carla asked, looking concerned now. "You've been kind of out of it all day." Jill nodded, but the weight of the diploma in her hand was a constant reminder of the surreal event that had happened on stage. It was like a seed of dread had been planted inside her, and now it was growing, feeding on her every thought. The gym was beginning to empty as students filed out, talking excitedly about parties and plans for the summer. Jill's eyes kept darting around the room, as though she expected to see the figure again. Her heart thudded in her chest, each beat louder than the last. She needed to get out of here, to get somewhere safe, but her feet felt like they were stuck in place. "Jill." "Earth to Jill." Carla waved a hand in front of her face. "Come on. I'll drive us back to my place. We can hang out and talk about college stuff. Everything's fine, right?" Jill looked at her best friend, forced another smile, and nodded. "Yeah. Yeah, let's go." They made their way out of the gym, stepping into the bright sunlight of the late afternoon. Jill's skin burned under the sudden heat, but the sun didn't feel warm. It felt foreign, like the world had shifted just slightly out of sync, and she was caught in a moment that didn't belong to her. The parking lot was buzzing with the noise of parents, friends, and classmates, all in the process of leaving. Carla's car was parked near the edge, a small silver sedan, waiting for them like a lifeline. Jill's eyes scanned the area again, but all she saw were people, laughing and talking, not a shadow in sight. When they got to the car, Carla slid into the driver's seat without hesitation, but Jill hesitated before getting in. She glanced over her shoulder one last time at the high school building, and for the briefest moment, she thought she saw it, the figure, standing in the window of the second floor, watching her with cold, black eyes. She blinked, and the figure was gone. "Jill." Carla's voice cut through her thoughts again. "You're not going to stand there all day, are you?" Jill took a deep breath and forced herself to sit in the passenger seat. She couldn't afford to keep getting lost in her own mind. She needed to focus, to pretend that everything was normal. Graduation was over. The figure was just a trick of the light. Maybe her stress and exhaustion had conjured it. That had to be it. The car started, and Carla pulled out of the parking lot, driving toward her house. Jill stared out the window, her gaze fixed on the passing scenery, but the darkness that had settled in her chest still remained. She kept expecting to see the figure in the rearview mirror, its pale hand reaching toward her, but each time, the mirror reflected only the road behind them. As they drove, Jill's thoughts began to spiral. What was it? She couldn't ignore the sensation of the figure anymore. It was like a shadow that clung to her, following her everywhere. And the stain on her gown, it had to be blood. Had the figure touched her? Had it left something on her? Her mind raced through the possibilities, each one more horrifying than the last. Was it real? Or was it all in her head? The car pulled into Carla's driveway, and Jill blinked, disoriented. She hadn't even realized they had arrived. "Hey, you're really scaring me now," Carla said, looking at her with concern. "You're acting like you've seen a ghost. Are you sure you're okay?" Jill opened her mouth to answer, but the words caught in her throat. She didn't know what to say. She didn't even know what she was feeling. All she knew was that something was following her. Something she couldn't escape. "I'm fine," Jill lied, forcing a smile. "Let's just go inside. We can talk about it later." But as they walked toward the front door, Jill couldn't shake the feeling that something, was still watching her. Part 4, The Shadow in the Mirror. Jill sat in Carla's living room, her hands folded tightly in her lap as the hum of the television filled the space between them. Carla was chatting away about graduation parties and summer plans, but Jill barely heard her. Her mind was elsewhere, tangled in the haze of dread that refused to leave her. Every sound seemed amplified, every shadow deeper and more menacing. Carla glanced over at her, her expression softening. "You're not listening again," she said with a teasing smile, though there was a hint of concern in her voice. "Do you want to talk about it? Whatever's going on with you?" "I don't know what it is, but you've been freaking me out all day." Jill shifted uncomfortably in her seat, still unable to fully shake the feeling of being watched. She wasn't sure if she was imagining it, but the house felt too quiet, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something. "It's just... I don't know, Carla," Jill muttered, rubbing her temples. "I've been feeling weird all day. I saw something at graduation, and now, I don't know what to think. I keep feeling like something's following me." Carla furrowed her brow. "Something's following you? What do you mean?" Jill hesitated. She wanted to tell Carla everything, the figure, the cold touch, the voice that whispered in her mind. But part of her feared that if she spoke it aloud, it would make it all too real. Still, she couldn't shake the thought that she was losing control, that the figure, whatever it was slowly seeping into her world. I don't know," Jill said, her voice shaking slightly. "I think I'm just stressed. Maybe it's the pressure of everything. Graduation. Leaving high school. But I feel like something's off. Something isn't right. I don't know how to explain it." Carla studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Maybe you're just overthinking it. It's been a lot, you know. We're going off to college soon. Things are changing. But if it helps, you can crash here tonight. Take a break from everything." Jill managed a weak smile. "Thanks, I appreciate it. I can't shake this feeling, Carla. You've got a lot on your plate. We all do. It's normal to be freaked out," Carla said, standing up to grab some snacks from the kitchen. "We'll hang out tonight. You'll feel better. Just relax, okay?" But Jill didn't feel better. She didn't feel better at all. As the evening wore on, Jill did her best to distract herself, but the shadow in the back of her mind kept growing, taking root deeper with each passing hour. The television flickered in the background, but the static from the screen was too loud, too sharp in her ears. The house felt like a cage, and she was trapped in it. Carla had gone to bed around midnight, leaving Jill to her own thoughts in the living room. It wasn't until she stood to get some water that she noticed something: the mirror. There, in the hallway, she had passed it several times that evening without giving it much thought. But now, as she stood in the dim light of the kitchen, the mirror caught her attention. It was an old, full-length mirror, framed in ornate silver that was beginning to tarnish at the edges. Jill had always thought it was a little out of place in Carla's modern house, but tonight it felt wrong. She stared at her reflection for a moment, her own tired face staring back at her. But then, something shifted in the glass. A shadow. Jill's breath caught in her throat. The reflection in the mirror didn't match her own movements. In the mirror, her face was twisted in an expression of horror, her mouth open as if she were screaming. But when Jill glanced down at her own face, she saw only the calm, blank expression she had come to expect. The difference was so jarring, she stumbled back, her heart racing. "Is someone behind me?" she whispered, her voice shaking as she turned to look behind her. Nothing. The hallway was empty. But when she looked back at the mirror, the shadow was still there. A dark form, just behind her reflection. A figure, its features indistinct and hazy, but unmistakably there. Her breath came in ragged gasps as the figure slowly leaned forward, its head tilting in the reflection. Jill didn't move, couldn't move. The figure wasn't just standing there, it was moving closer to her, its outline becoming clearer. It was not her, the shadow in the glass was something else. Before she could react, the figure's hand shot out, pressing against the mirror with a force that made the glass shudder. Jill's heart froze in her chest. She couldn't move, couldn't scream. All she could do was watch as the figure's fingers slid across the surface of the glass, leaving dark streaks of something, red. In that moment, the air around her grew cold. The whispering voice from earlier filled her head again, but it wasn't just a whisper, it was a scream. "You should have never come." Jill's body snapped into motion then. She backed away from the mirror, her hands shaking as she fumbled for the door to Carla's room. She wasn't sure what was happening, but she knew she couldn't stay in that hallway, not with it watching her. She burst into Carla's room, slamming the door behind her and collapsing against it, her breath ragged. Carla stirred from her sleep, groggy and confused. "Jill. What the hell is going on?" she mumbled, rubbing her eyes. I saw something. Something in the mirror. I can't explain it, but there's something in this house, Carla. Something bad. I can feel it." Carla sat up, her face now fully awake with concern. "What are you talking about?" "You're freaking out, Jill. There's nothing here." No. It's real. I swear to you, Carla, something's here. Watching me. I can't explain it." Jill's voice cracked, her panic rising as she pressed her hand to her chest. "It's been following me all day. It was at graduation. It touched me." Carla's expression shifted, and for the first time all night, Jill could see the fear in her eyes. "Touched you? Jill, you're scaring me. I think you need to calm down. You're not making any sense." "I know it doesn't make sense. But it's real. And it's not leaving. I saw it in the mirror. It's here." Carla stood up, her voice growing firm. "Okay. Let's get you some water. You're just overtired, you're freaking out, but you're okay. I'll stay up with you, alright? You just need some sleep." Jill shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. I can't sleep. If I sleep, it's going to come for me. It's going to." But then the sound cut through the air, so sudden, so sharp, that Jill froze. It was the creak of footsteps. Slow. Heavy. And they were coming from the hallway. Part 5, The Presence in the House. The footsteps were slow, deliberate. Each one echoed through the dark house, carrying with it a sense of dread that made Jill's blood run cold. She couldn't see anything, not yet. But the air in the room was thick, stifling, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. The world seemed to narrow to the sound of those heavy, measured steps. Jill stood frozen, her body trembling with fear as she stared at the door. It was as though the very act of looking at it would make whatever was on the other side more real. Carla had gone quiet, too, sitting on the edge of her bed, her eyes wide and unblinking. "Who's there?" Carla whispered, her voice barely audible, as though speaking too loudly might bring the thing closer. Jill's throat tightened, and she shook her head, unable to answer. The footsteps came closer, one slow step after another. The house was too quiet, too still. Every creak of the floorboards, every faint sigh of the house settling, felt like it was amplified in the silence. Then, they stopped. For a moment, there was only stillness. The kind of silence that presses in on your ears, making you wonder if your own heartbeat is too loud. Jill felt a bead of sweat slip down her neck, her pulse hammering in her ears. "Carla," Jill whispered, barely able to speak. "Do you hear that?" Carla nodded, her hand reaching toward Jill as if to offer comfort, but even that movement felt fragile, like the world might shatter if she moved too quickly. The next sound came from the direction of the door. A soft tapping, as if someone were knocking, or maybe just scratching. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there, lingering in the air. Jill's eyes locked on the door, her body tense and ready to bolt. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to run, but her legs wouldn't move. The fear was paralyzing. And then, the doorknob rattled. The noise was sharp and sudden, breaking the fragile stillness that had settled in the room. Jill gasped, her heart leaping into her throat, as the door shook beneath the invisible force. She grabbed Carla's wrist instinctively, her fingers digging into the skin, as though the touch might anchor her to reality. But Carla didn't react. She didn't say anything. The rattling continued, louder now, accompanied by a low, throaty whisper that seemed to reverberate through the walls. "Let me in." Jill's breath caught in her chest, and she knew, with every inch of her being, that this wasn't a joke. This wasn't some prank. This was real. The whisper, the voice, was unmistakable. It was the same voice she had heard earlier, the one that had scraped at her thoughts. It was cold, guttural, as though it came from somewhere far below the surface of the earth. The door rattled again, more violently this time, as if something was trying to break through. The sound of claws scratching against wood filled the air, a sickening noise that made Jill's stomach churn. "Carla," Jill whispered, barely able to breathe. "We have to." But before she could finish, the door exploded inward, splintering against an unseen force. The room was filled with the sound of wood cracking, and Jill felt a blast of cold air rush in, as though the very temperature had dropped by several degrees in a single instant. She screamed. The figure stood in the doorway. It was tall, too tall, its limbs unnaturally long and twisted, its body cloaked in shadow. Its face. Jill couldn't see its face. It was obscured by a veil of darkness, a blackness that seemed to swallow the light around it. But Jill could feel its eyes, burning into her, pulling at her mind like gravity. Its hands reached toward her, fingers thin and long, each one ending in sharp, jagged claws. The room grew colder, and Jill could see her breath misting in the air. The figure was real. It was here, in this room with them. "You should have never come," the voice hissed again, this time louder, the words seeping into her mind like poison. The figure stepped forward, its form now completely filling the doorway. Jill's heart hammered in her chest as she looked at Carla. But Carla wasn't there anymore. Jill blinked, and in the instant it took, the room had shifted. Carla was gone, nowhere to be seen, her bed empty. Panic gripped Jill's chest as she spun around, desperately searching for her friend, but the figure was closer now, its elongated limbs moving with unnatural speed. It stepped into the room, its claws scraping against the floor, and Jill knew, this thing wasn't just after her. It had already taken something from her. Carla was gone. Jill turned to run, but the air seemed to thicken, like she was swimming through it, her legs heavy, every step a struggle. The figure was almost upon her now. She could hear its breath, or was it the wind, rushing past her ears, sharp and cold. "You're next," it whispered, its voice curling around her like smoke. Jill pushed herself forward, her feet stumbling over the carpet, her mind screaming. But there was nowhere to run. The walls of the room seemed to close in on her, the edges of her vision darkening. The figure was behind her now, its icy fingers brushing against the back of her neck. It was too late. The figure lunged. Jill's scream was cut off abruptly as she was pulled into darkness, the cold of its touch overwhelming. She struggled, but her body refused to obey, her limbs going numb as the world around her swirled into nothingness. And then, silence. Part 6, The Depths of the Dark. Jill didn't know how long she was suspended in the dark, her body numb, her mind swirling in an endless fog. Time felt irrelevant. She couldn't hear anything, no sounds, no voices, not even the rush of blood in her ears. There was only the weight of the darkness, pressing in from all sides, suffocating her. She couldn't move. She couldn't see. It felt like she was floating, but she wasn't sure if it was her body or her mind that was adrift. She was lost somewhere, caught between reality and something else entirely. Somewhere else. Then, the coldness returned. It wrapped around her like a tight coil, seeping into her bones. Her breath, shallow and ragged, came out in short bursts. She could feel something, someone, there with her. Something that wasn't quite human, its presence like an iron weight pressing against her chest. Jill's body trembled involuntarily, but she couldn't move. She tried to scream, but no sound escaped. She was trapped in this empty void, her thoughts spiraling deeper, further away from any sense of reality. Jill. The whisper slithered through the darkness, so familiar, so cold, that it froze her in place. It was the voice. The same voice. But this time, it wasn't just a whisper. It was everywhere. Inside her, around her. It felt like it was part of her. "Jill, you shouldn't have come." The words struck her like a physical blow, the force of them reverberating through her skull. Panic surged within her, but she had no way to escape. Her body was paralyzed, caught in this inescapable grip. "Who are you?" she managed to whisper, though the words felt weak and broken. The darkness around her shifted, undulating, like it was alive. There was something in it now, a shape, a presence. The air seemed to twist and bend, forming a vague outline in the blackness. Slowly, painfully, it came into focus. The figure. It stood there, towering above her, its dark form shrouded in an unnatural mist. Its limbs were long and contorted, impossibly thin. The same cold, hollow eyes, like pits of black voids, burned into her soul. Jill tried to look away, but her eyes were fixed on the creature. Its face was not a face, it was a mask of shifting shadows, like something torn between being human and something far worse. Something otherworldly. A being that shouldn't exist in the realm of the living. "I told you," the voice rasped, low and guttural. "You shouldn't have come." It stepped closer, its form flickering in and out of existence, like the shadows themselves were pulling it forward. Jill felt the air grow even colder as it neared, an icy breath that crawled under her skin. She could feel its presence in her chest, in her heart, like it was trying to crack her open from the inside. I didn't know," Jill whispered, her voice strained. "I didn't mean to." "You never do." The figure's voice was colder now, more mocking. "You never know when you disturb things that were never meant to be disturbed." Jill's heart pounded in her chest, her fear growing exponentially with each passing moment. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I want nothing," the figure replied, its voice full of dark amusement. "But you've already given me everything." The figure's hand, its long, skeletal fingers, reached out toward her. Jill recoiled, but no matter how much she tried to move, she remained anchored to the spot, helpless. "Your soul, Jill," it continued, its voice dripping with malice. "You've given it to me. Whether you realize it or not." Jill's breath hitched, her body shuddering as the words sank in. My soul, she repeated in disbelief. Yes. It's all mine now. All of you. The figure's fingers brushed against her skin, cold and sharp like ice. A searing pain shot through her body, and for a brief, horrifying second, Jill felt her very essence being pulled from her. It wasn't just physical pain, it was a spiritual kind of agony, one that tore at the fabric of her being, unraveling her piece by piece. Her vision blurred, and she could feel herself slipping away, her consciousness fading into nothing. The darkness around her deepened, pressing in on her, drowning her in its cold embrace. And then, in that moment of fading, Jill realized something: she wasn't just trapped here with the figure. The figure had always been there, always watching her, following her through the cracks in the world. It had been waiting. Waiting for her to slip. The realization came like a tidal wave, crashing into her mind. This wasn't the first time. The figure wasn't just a creature from her nightmares or some twisted hallucination, it was the very thing that had been following her all her life, a shadow that had attached itself to her soul the moment she was born. It was the darkness in her heart. It was everything she had ever been afraid of, a part of her that she had never been able to escape. The cold, sharp fingers of the figure tightened around her wrist, and the darkness pulled her deeper. Jill's last thought before she was consumed by the void was that she had never truly escaped. Part 7, The Echoes of What Was. Jill's mind teetered on the edge of nothingness. Her body, frozen in place, was suspended in the void, unable to move, unable to scream. The shadow figure loomed above her, its presence like an oppressive weight, crushing her spirit. But within the blackness, there was a flicker, a tiny spark of light, like a memory trying to break free. She knew this place. It was familiar. It was a place she had been before, though she couldn't place it, couldn't remember when. I've been here before. Jill thought, her mind struggling against the suffocating pull of the figure. The figure, as if sensing her thoughts, tilted its head. Its eyes, those black, hollow eyes, burned with an ancient, unfathomable knowledge. You don't remember, do you? It rasped. No, of course not. Why would you? Jill's breath caught in her throat, the fog of her fear lifting just enough for her to think clearly. Remember what? The figure's fingers traced the air in front of her, leaving trails of darkness that seemed to shimmer like oil. You have always belonged to me, Jill. You always have. No, her voice was weak, but it was enough to break the silence that had surrounded them. I don't understand. What do you mean? The figure's form shifted, twisting, as if it were trying to become something else. It looked almost human for a split second, then morphed back into its original, monstrous form. You were born for this, it said, its voice a cacophony of whispers and screams. You have always carried the mark. The mark that makes you mine. Jill's heart pounded, her chest tightening. A mark? She couldn't remember any mark. She didn't know what the figure was talking about. Her entire life, she had never felt different, never felt like she belonged to anything other than her own existence. What do you want from me? Jill repeated, her voice rising in desperation. I don't belong to you. I don't even know who you are. You will, it replied, its tone dripping with malice. You will remember. But it's too late for you to escape now. A sharp, almost violent pull yanked Jill's consciousness further into the void. The darkness swallowed her whole, and for a split second, she felt as if she was falling, her body weightless and fragile. There was no up, no down, only an infinite spiral of emptiness, like the world itself was crumbling away beneath her feet. And then, just as suddenly, there was light. Jill blinked rapidly, her eyes struggling to adjust. Her chest heaved with a deep breath, her body waking up from the numbness that had held it captive. But this wasn't the empty, cold void she had just been in. No, this was somewhere different. She was lying on a cold, hard surface, stone, maybe. She could taste the faint taste of dust in the air, and the faint scent of mildew hung around her like a thick fog. Her body was sore, her limbs stiff as though they had been bound for a long time. When she sat up, her head spinning, she realized with a jolt that she was no longer in the house. The room was small, windowless, and dimly lit by a single hanging bulb that flickered faintly above her. The walls were made of cold stone, the floor covered in cracked tiles that had long since lost their color. It looked like some kind of underground chamber, like a prison, a tomb, something that had been forgotten by time. "Where am I?" Jill whispered to herself, her voice hoarse. Her breath came in quick, shallow gasps, and her eyes scanned the room, desperate to make sense of the disorienting new surroundings. A low, guttural laugh echoed through the chamber, making her jump. She whirled around, heart thumping violently in her chest, but the only thing she saw was a stone altar at the far end of the room, covered in dust and cobwebs. "Welcome," a voice whispered from the darkness. It was unmistakably the same voice, the one she had heard in the darkness. The voice of the figure. She froze, a deep chill creeping into her bones as the realization hit her. She wasn't alone in this place. And whatever was here with her wasn't human. "You brought me here," Jill whispered, the horror of the truth crashing down on her. The figure's laugh reverberated again, louder this time. "Yes, Jill," it said, its tone smooth and almost tender. "I've brought you back. You always come back." Jill tried to stand, her legs trembling beneath her as she struggled to find her footing. "I don't understand. Why is this happening?" The figure's form flickered in and out of existence in the shadows. "You think you're the first? The first to try to escape? The first to think they could run from their fate?" Jill's mind reeled as the words sank in. She wasn't just dealing with a single entity, she was trapped in some kind of cyclical nightmare, one that had existed for a long time. The mark. The figure had said it had always been a part of her. She stumbled backward, her eyes darting across the room in search of an escape, but there was nowhere to go. The walls were smooth, unyielding. She was trapped again, but this time, it felt different. She wasn't just running from the figure. She was running from herself. "I don't want this." Jill cried out, her voice breaking as tears filled her eyes. "I never asked for any of this." "You don't have a choice," the figure said, its voice echoing from all sides. "You are part of the darkness. You were born to be mine." Jill's knees gave out, and she sank to the cold stone floor, trembling as the weight of the truth crashed down on her. The figure was right. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't random. Everything had led to this moment, and there was nothing she could do to change it. "Why can't I remember?" Jill whispered to herself, her voice hollow. "Why didn't I remember sooner?" The darkness in the room seemed to deepen as the figure stepped forward, its shadow stretching over her like a blanket of ice. "Because," it said, its voice low and intimate now, "you were never meant to remember. Not until it was too late." Suddenly, a distant, familiar sound pierced the thick silence. A door creaked open, the sound of footsteps echoing faintly from the corridor outside. Jill's head snapped up, her heart racing once more. The figure paused, sensing her attention. "Oh yes," it said with a cruel smile that Jill could feel in her chest. "There's someone else coming. Someone important." Jill's blood ran cold. "What are you going to do to them?" "You're about to find out," the figure replied, its voice a chilling whisper that seemed to reach into Jill's soul. Jill's eyes locked onto the door. She had no idea who was on the other side, but she knew one thing for certain, whoever it was, they were about to become part of this nightmare, too. Part 8, The Unraveling. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Each step was slow, deliberate, like a predator closing in on its prey. Jill's heart raced, and she could feel the figure's presence looming over her like an oppressive storm, waiting to break. She wanted to move, to get up and run, but her body refused to obey. She was paralyzed, caught in the grip of something far darker than fear itself. The door creaked open, the rusty hinges groaning under the weight of something, or someone, entering. Jill's eyes flicked toward it, her breath shallow, her entire being tense. She couldn't see who was coming, but she could feel it, they were walking right into it. The figure beside her remained still, its shadow growing longer, its presence suffocating. It didn't speak. It didn't need to. It knew what was about to happen. A figure appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim light from the hallway. Jill blinked, her mind racing to place the person, to make sense of the unexpected visitor. The outline was familiar, but her heart sank as she realized who it was. It was Carla. Carla stepped forward, her expression vacant, her eyes distant, like she was in a trance. She moved as if in slow motion, her feet dragging with each step. She didn't acknowledge Jill's presence, didn't even look in her direction. Her face was pale, her lips parted in a slack, almost lifeless manner. Jill's heart stopped for a second, a shudder running through her. Carla? How is she here? Carla! Jill croaked, her voice barely audible. Carla, wake up. Get out of here. But Carla didn't respond. She didn't even flinch. The figure beside Jill stirred, its black eyes never leaving Carla's figure as she walked deeper into the room, the sound of her feet dragging across the stone floor the only noise breaking the heavy silence. What's happening to her? Jill whispered in horror, more to herself than anyone else. Her chest tightened with anxiety as the figure's laughter filled the air. She's already mine, the figure hissed, its voice a low growl, filled with malicious delight. And now, so are you. Jill's stomach churned. The reality of what was unfolding hit her all at once. Carla wasn't just an innocent bystander. The figure had already marked her too. She was here because she had been drawn in, just like Jill had been. No one could escape once they had been chosen. Jill's mind raced for an answer, for a way to break the cycle. But there was no time. Carla was already too close to the altar now, her eyes still vacant, her body moving as if controlled by something else. Jill's pulse quickened, her panic growing. No, no, no. Jill shouted, pushing herself to her feet, ignoring the pain that shot up her legs. She reached out, her fingers trembling. Carla, please, snap out of it. Don't listen to it. But Carla didn't hear her. She continued walking, her steps slow and unsteady, heading directly for the altar at the far end of the room. It was then that Jill noticed something even more horrifying. The altar was not just a stone slab. It was covered in markings. Symbols carved into the stone, symbols Jill vaguely recognized from her nightmares. Symbols that were meant to bind, to summon, to claim. The figure behind her whispered, its voice soft but insidious. It's not just your soul that I crave, Jill. It's hers too. You've already given me yours. Now, I just need hers. Jill's heart raced as she realized what was about to happen. The figure wasn't just manipulating Carla. It was using her as a vessel, a sacrifice. Carla's soul was the final piece in whatever twisted ritual was taking place here. No. Jill screamed, her voice hoarse with desperation. She surged forward, her body fueled by pure panic, but she was too slow. The figure moved, faster than Jill could comprehend, blocking her path with a swipe of its long, shadowy arm. You can't stop it, the figure whispered, leaning down so close to her that she could feel its icy breath against her skin. You were never meant to. Jill tried to push past it, but the coldness of its form pressed into her, freezing her in place. She felt the weight of its presence more than ever before. It was inside her, consuming her from the inside out, filling every crack in her mind with fear and darkness. But then, something unexpected happened. Carla stopped. She stood motionless at the altar, her eyes vacant, but something in her body shifted. There was a faint tremor that ran through her, like a ripple passing over still water. Her hands, which had been hanging limp at her sides, twitched. Carla. Jill gasped, hope rising in her chest. For the briefest moment, Carla's eyes flickered, as if she were coming out of a deep sleep. She blinked, and then, in a sudden, violent movement, she turned, her eyes now wide, filled with panic. Jill. Carla's voice was hoarse, desperate. Get away from it. You have to run. It's taking me. Jill's heart soared. Carla was still in there. She hadn't been fully consumed. Not yet. But before Jill could respond, the figure reacted. It screeched, the sound like the tearing of fabric, and lashed out with its long, clawed hand, slashing through the air between them. No! Jill shouted, her body moving faster than it ever had before, her feet carrying her toward Carla. She had to reach her. She had to save her. But just as she took another step, the room seemed to distort, the walls bending in on themselves. The stone floor cracked beneath her feet, sending sharp tremors through the air. Carla screamed, but it wasn't Carla anymore. The figure had already begun to take hold of her completely. The shadows reached out like a storm, wrapping around Carla's body, twisting and contorting her form. Her face was the last part of her that remained human, her eyes wide with terror as the darkness swallowed her whole. No! Jill screamed, throwing herself toward Carla, but her friend's body was no longer her own. The darkness had consumed her completely. The last thing Jill saw before everything went black was Carla's face, now distorted and empty, as the shadows took her completely. She wasn't even a person anymore. She was nothing. And then, the room went silent. Part 9, The Price of the Broken. Jill's body felt heavy, as though the very air around her had thickened into lead. The room, once a place of cold, oppressive silence, now echoed with a low hum, a vibration that seemed to come from deep within the earth itself. The shadows that had claimed Carla's body swirled around Jill, and she stumbled backward, her breath ragged and shallow. Jill's mind was spinning, her thoughts broken into jagged fragments. No, no, no. This can't be real. Carla can't be gone. She can't. She reached out, her hands trembling, but the figure's voice, cold, mocking, cut through the fog of her thoughts, pulling her back to the grim reality of the situation. You see now, don't you? The figure rasped, its voice echoing around the chamber like 1,000 whispers. You were never meant to escape. None of you were. Jill's pulse hammered in her ears as she struggled to steady herself. She clenched her fists, her knuckles white with strain. You lied. I never agreed to any of this. The figure laughed, a sound that scraped against her skin like nails on glass. You think it matters whether you agree? You've been mine since the day you were born, Jill. You think this is just about the ritual? About the mark? No. It's about choice. And you've never had one. Jill's breath caught in her throat. The weight of the figure's words pressed down on her, making it harder to breathe, harder to think. She'd never had a choice. It had been waiting for her, stalking her through her life, pulling at the strings of her fate until it could finally reel her in. The figure's eyes, those hollow, endless voids, locked onto hers, and for a moment, Jill felt herself being drawn into them, into that black abyss. Her mind flashed with fragmented images, memories that weren't hers. Faces, people she'd never met, places she'd never been. A pattern, a history, stretching far back into time. Something ancient, something predestined. You're not the first, Jill. You won't be the last. All of them were chosen. Just like you, the figure crooned, its voice both soothing and horrifying. Jill's head spun, nausea crawling up her throat. She staggered forward, her legs like rubber beneath her, desperate to escape the pull of the figure's words. No. I won't be part of this. I'll fight it. A cruel smile curled on the figure's face, if it could be called a smile. Its form flickered in and out, warping as if reality itself couldn't contain its monstrous shape. You can't fight what is already inside you, Jill. She wanted to scream, to run, but there was nowhere to go. The chamber's walls closed in on her like the narrowing of a coffin. No windows, no doors, just the oppressive weight of the figure's will. She was trapped. And Carla was lost. And yet, in the deepest pit of her terror, Jill heard a whisper. Not yet. The voice was faint, a faint echo that seemed to come from the very air itself. It was her own voice. Jill froze, the faintest flicker of hope sparking in the deepest corner of her mind. What? She looked around, heart racing. Who's there? Her voice trembled with the fragility of her sanity, but the whisper was still there, like a breath she couldn't catch. Not yet, Jill. You have one more chance. The figure tilted its head at her, a gesture that almost seemed curious. What are you hearing, Jill? There's no one left to save you. Not even yourself. But Jill didn't listen. She focused, desperately clinging to the whisper that had threaded through her thoughts. She felt it again, the feeling of something deep within her, something alive, something real. Her hand shot to her chest, where her heart pounded erratically, as if something were awakening. Not yet. Her mind flickered with memories, her childhood, long nights spent in her room, the strange sense of being watched that had always been with her. It wasn't paranoia. It was real. And then, a flash, when she was a child, alone in her room, the painting her parents had hung on the wall, a portrait of a woman she'd never recognized. Jill's heart pounded louder. The face from that painting, the woman with eyes as empty as the figures, was connected to this. The same eyes, the same presence. The figure wasn't the only thing haunting her. The pieces clicked into place. The figure, sensing her focus, hissed, its voice like 1,000 slithering whispers. You think you understand? You think the memories will save you? You are mine, Jill. Nothing you do will change that. Jill's chest tightened. She was losing ground. But there was something else, something hidden deep within her that could still be unlocked. The painting. Jill's vision blurred for a second, and when it cleared, she was back in her room, the one from when she was a child. The same walls, the same bed, the same stillness. But now, the painting was in front of her, vivid and real. She stepped forward, feeling the pull of it, as if it were calling her. The woman in the painting, her eyes empty, but her smile almost knowing, stared back at her. You're not alone, the whisper came again, this time stronger. Her fingers brushed the canvas, and suddenly, the world around her shattered. The room dissolved into nothing, and in its place, a new reality took form. A cold, endless hallway stretched before her, dimly lit by a flickering light at the far end. The painting was still there, hovering just before her, but it was different now. The woman in the painting was alive, her eyes now full of light, as if she were aware. You, the woman whispered, her voice both familiar and distant. You've always known the way. It's time to remember. And then Jill understood. This wasn't just about fighting the figure, it was about facing her past. The mark. The ritual. The reason she had always been drawn to the painting. It had always been leading her here, to this point, to this choice. The figure's form warped around her, the darkness pressing in, but Jill no longer felt powerless. She was remembering. It's time to break the cycle. Part 10, The Unwritten Fate. The flickering light at the end of the hallway grew brighter as Jill walked toward it, her heart pounding in her chest. The world around her, distorted, fractured, like shattered glass, seemed to bend in unnatural ways as if reality itself was unraveling. The shadows that had once trapped her now seemed to retreat, hesitant, as though even they feared the force she was beginning to unlock within herself. Jill's eyes were fixed on the painting, which was now floating before her, its frame glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. The woman in the painting, once empty and lifeless, was now staring directly at her, her eyes full of purpose and something that felt like recognition. You remember now, the woman's voice whispered, soft but clear, cutting through the darkness around her. You remember what you are. Jill's pulse quickened as the weight of the words settled on her. She hadn't just been drawn to the painting as a child. She hadn't just been haunted by it. She had been guided. The painting, the woman within it, she had always been part of Jill's life, a reminder of something ancient. Something Jill had never truly understood until now. "I don't understand," Jill whispered, though her voice was steadier now, her fear mingled with a surge of something else, clarity. "What am I? What does it all mean?" The woman's lips parted in a slow, knowing smile. Her eyes shone with wisdom that Jill could barely comprehend. "You are a part of a cycle. A pattern that has repeated itself for centuries. You, Jill, are the key to breaking it." The hallway around her seemed to stretch and contract, its walls bending like soft clay in the grip of some unknown force. The figure, the shadow that had pursued her all this time, was now distant, almost invisible, as if the very act of Jill recognizing her purpose had weakened its hold. "The ritual," Jill whispered, piecing it together. "The painting. The mark. You've always been here, haven't you?" The woman in the painting nodded slowly. "Yes. You were born to be more than you knew. To carry a burden that you could never escape. But you've always had the power to stop it." She paused, her gaze softening. "But it requires sacrifice, Jill. Not just of the body, but of the heart." Jill's breath caught in her throat as a cold chill spread through her. "Sacrifice? I don't want to sacrifice anyone else," Jill said, her voice cracking. "I can't. I couldn't even save Carla." The woman's smile softened, but there was no pity in it, only understanding. "You couldn't save her because she wasn't yours to save. She wasn't part of your path. But you, Jill, you are." She tilted her head slightly, as if she were considering Jill's every word. "The figure, the shadow that haunts you, is part of you too. A part of you that has existed since the beginning. It was always meant to be." Jill's head spun, confusion swirling in a storm of emotions. "It's a part of me," she repeated, her voice shaking. "Then why am I fighting it? If it's in me, why do I want to destroy it?" The woman's eyes softened, and Jill felt a strange sense of peace wash over her. "Because you are not meant to destroy it. You are meant to understand it. And in doing so, you will free yourself." "Free myself," Jill echoed the words, though they felt foreign on her tongue. The hallway around her continued to shift, the walls melting away, leaving only the woman and Jill, the two of them alone in the darkening space. The woman's form flickered slightly, like the image of a fading star. "You must decide, Jill. Will you accept your role? Will you accept that the shadow is as much a part of you as the light?" The woman's voice was soft but heavy, filled with an urgency Jill couldn't ignore. Jill closed her eyes, trying to sort through the flood of emotions and thoughts crashing through her. Fear. Confusion. Anger. And then something else. Something deeper. Truth. For the first time in what felt like forever, Jill stopped running. She stopped trying to fight the inevitable. "I don't want to be consumed," she whispered, opening her eyes to look at the woman. "But I don't want to lose myself either." The woman's smile was both sad and knowing. "You cannot lose yourself. You will only find yourself. But first, you must embrace what you have always been." Jill felt a tremor of something deep within her, something ancient and powerful. It wasn't fear anymore. It was acceptance. The painting shimmered, and the woman's form seemed to stretch, becoming one with the shifting darkness. Jill's chest tightened as her surroundings twisted around her, as though time itself was folding in on itself. And then, the figure appeared again, its presence unmistakable, no longer distant, but towering over her like a storm about to break. "No!" Jill gasped, stepping back, her heart pounding with panic. But this time, she didn't feel the terror she had before. Instead, she felt something else, determination. The figure loomed closer, its shape flickering between shadow and substance. Its hollow eyes bore down on Jill, and for a moment, she saw nothing but darkness. "You think you can defeat me, don't you?" the figure sneered, its voice like the scraping of metal. "You think you can erase me?" Jill stood her ground. Her voice, though trembling, was strong. I'm not here to defeat you, she said, her words a quiet declaration. I'm here to understand you. The figure's laugh was a harsh, shrill sound that filled the space. You understand nothing. You can't understand me, Jill. I am the shadow. I am the void. Jill took a deep breath, stepping forward, feeling the pulse of something awakening within her chest, something powerful, something alive. I understand you, she whispered. You were born from me. You are part of me, and I am part of you. But we don't have to be enemies. We don't have to keep this cycle going. For a moment, there was silence. The figure's form wavered, flickering as if it were unsure of how to respond. And then, Jill did something she hadn't planned on. She reached out, her hand trembling as she touched the shadow. The darkness swallowed her fingers, wrapping around them like cold smoke. But instead of pulling her in, the darkness hesitated. Jill's breath came in slow, steady gasps as she held her ground, her mind flooded with images, faces from her past, the painting, the woman, and the strange, ancient rhythm of her own blood. It was all connected. Every part of her. Every breath. Every decision. And with that realization, the shadow shifted. The oppressive weight lightened, its form becoming less jagged, less consuming. I don't want to fight anymore, Jill said, her voice strong, calm. I want to live. I want to be free. The figure paused, its eyes narrowing as if it were searching for a weakness. And then, with an unexpected sound, a deep, resonant sigh, the darkness began to fade. Not vanishing, but receding, retreating into the shadows where it had once been confined. Jill's hand lowered, and for the first time since she had entered this nightmare, she felt the air around her clear. The figure was still there, but it was no longer the all-consuming force it had once been. It was simply there, a part of her, yes, but no longer a threat. You have broken the cycle, the woman's voice whispered from the fading edges of the painting. You have found peace within yourself. Jill closed her eyes, the weight of everything lifting from her shoulders. She wasn't free of everything, but she was free of the endless fight. And that, for now, was enough. Part 11, The Last Choice. The darkness was no longer the suffocating force it had once been. It had retreated, fading into the corners of Jill's mind, where it lingered like an old, familiar wound, no longer a constant ache, but something that would always be there, a shadow that could not be erased. She had made her choice, to accept the darkness as part of her, to stop fighting, to stop running. For the first time, Jill felt a strange sense of peace wash over her. The air was cooler now, the oppressive heat of the figure's presence gone. The hallway she stood in, once so alien and terrifying, now felt oddly familiar, like the space between her past and present had merged, the boundaries dissolving into something she could comprehend. Is it over? Jill whispered, her voice breaking the silence that had settled around her. The faint hum from earlier was still there, but it no longer felt threatening. It felt distant, like the last echoes of a dream that was slowly fading. The figure loomed in front of her, its form shifting, no longer towering over her with its malevolent presence. It was smaller now, like a mirage that flickered in and out of existence. And yet, despite its diminished form, it was still there, still watching her with its hollow, all-knowing eyes. You've made your choice, it said softly, its voice a strange mix of approval and bitterness. But you still don't understand. Jill took a deep breath. Then help me understand. The figure remained silent for a long moment, as if considering her request. Then, with a sound like the rustling of dry leaves, it spoke again. You think the darkness is just an enemy, something to be defeated. But it is a part of every soul. A part of you. A part of everyone you've ever known. And yet, you believe you can escape it, run from it, fight it. The shadows shifted around Jill, swirling like smoke, but they didn't touch her. They hovered around her like a protective barrier, and she realized, this was her power now. Then why have I spent my whole life running from it? Jill asked, her voice calm but tinged with frustration. Why does it keep coming for me? The figure's eyes glowed faintly, and it moved closer, though it no longer seemed threatening. It doesn't come for you, Jill. It was always with you. Always waiting. This was never about escaping it. It's about what you do with it. What you decide to become. Jill's heart pounded as realization began to settle in her chest. The figure's words were not meant to frighten her. They were meant to open her eyes. To help her see the truth. What do I become? Jill asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The figure's form seemed to flicker once more, and when it spoke, its voice was softer, almost like a lament. What you become is up to you. You always had the choice. The cycle ends when you understand this, you are the keeper of your own fate. Not me. Not the painting. Not the shadows. Jill's fingers clenched at her sides, as if trying to grasp the meaning of the figure's words. It was true. For so long, she had believed she was a victim of circumstances, that the darkness was something thrust upon her. But now she understood, she had always been the one in control. The power was hers to wield. The shadows around her seemed to sense this change in her, swirling with greater intensity, but no longer in anger or malice. They were waiting for Jill to make her final choice. The woman in the painting, her guide, her anchor, appeared before her again, though now she was not confined to the canvas. She stood beside Jill, her form translucent but real, her smile serene. You've always known, Jill, the woman said softly, her voice calm and comforting. This choice was yours to make. You have the power to shape your own path, to break free from the cycle, and to live. Jill's throat tightened as she struggled to hold back the surge of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Her chest ached, and for a brief moment, the weight of everything she had been through hit her all at once, the fear, the loss, the feeling of being trapped in something she didn't understand. But now, she knew. She closed her eyes, taking a deep, steadying breath. Her pulse slowed, and the chaos in her mind began to quiet. She opened her eyes again, her gaze steady. The figure, the darkness that had haunted her, was still there, but it was no longer a force to be feared. It was just a part of her, a part of every soul. The shadows, which had once seemed so threatening, now felt like an old friend, one she didn't need to fight. She had been running for so long, but now, she was ready to stop. Then I choose, Jill said, her voice firm. I choose to live with it. I won't run anymore. I will be whole. The figure's form rippled with something that might have been approval, or perhaps just resignation. Then you've passed the final test, Jill. You've broken the cycle. You've broken free. The shadows around her softened, like the fading remnants of a storm. They no longer pressed in on her, but instead, hovered in the air like wisps of smoke. The oppressive weight that had once filled the room lifted, leaving only a quiet peace in its wake. The woman in the painting smiled again, and Jill felt an overwhelming sense of calm settle over her. For the first time in her life, she was no longer afraid. She was free to make her own choices, free to live without the fear of being consumed by the darkness. And then, just as it had come, the vision of the woman and the painting began to fade. The hallway, the shadows, the figure, they all began to melt away, like the remnants of a dream. Jill felt her feet beneath her again, and the world snapped back into focus. The room she was standing in was no longer a twisted, dark place, but her own room, the one she had woken up in that morning. The painting was still on the wall, its colors vibrant and warm, the woman's eyes calm and knowing, but no longer unsettling. The cycle was broken. Jill took a deep breath, the weight of the past lifting from her shoulders. She looked around, taking in the familiar surroundings, but for the first time, everything felt new, like she was seeing the world with fresh eyes. She didn't know what would come next, but she no longer feared it. Whatever was out there, whatever the future held, she would face it head-on. No more running. No more hiding. She was ready. Part 12, The Final Light. The morning sun filtered softly through the curtains, casting long, gentle shadows across the room. The light was warm, welcoming, an embrace after the long, dark night. Jill stood by the window, staring out at the world with a quiet sense of wonder. Everything felt different now. Even the air seemed fresher, as if the very atmosphere had been cleansed of the heavy, lingering presence that had clung to her for so long. She exhaled slowly, the deep breath filling her lungs with a sense of freedom she hadn't known she was capable of. The darkness, the shadow that had once consumed her thoughts, her days, and her nights, was gone. It had never been an external force, she realized, but a part of herself she hadn't been able to face until now. And in that understanding, it lost its power over her. The painting on the wall was still there, its colors as vibrant as ever. The woman's eyes, which had once held such terrifying emptiness, now seemed serene, almost content. The silent figure within the frame was no longer a symbol of dread. She was a guide, a reminder of the journey Jill had taken, the strength she had discovered within herself. Jill ran a hand through her hair, brushing the last remnants of the past from her thoughts. She could still hear the whispers of the shadows, faint but present, but they no longer called to her. They were no longer a force to be feared. They were simply part of the world, as much a part of her as the light that now filled her soul. A soft knock echoed from the door, and Jill turned, startled from her reverie. For a moment, she hesitated, old habits, old fears clawing at the edges of her calm. But then she realized, with a soft smile, that she no longer had to fear the unknown. "Come in," Jill called, her voice steady and calm, the warmth of her words filling the space. The door opened slowly, and there stood Carla, alive, whole, standing in the doorway like nothing had ever happened. Jill's heart skipped a beat, the rush of relief so overwhelming that for a moment, she thought she might faint. "Carla?" Jill whispered, her voice barely above a breath. I thought you were." Carla smiled, stepping inside the room. "I know," she said softly, her tone warm, though there was a touch of sadness in her eyes. "I know what you thought. I'm sorry, Jill. I didn't mean for you to carry that pain alone." Jill blinked, confused. "But you, Carla, you were gone." Carla sighed, her gaze flicking to the painting on the wall. "I never truly left, Jill." "Not really." She paused, her eyes searching Jill's face with a deep, knowing expression. "You had to face the truth on your own. The darkness, it was never about me. It was always about you." Jill felt a strange ache in her chest, a combination of relief and guilt. "But I couldn't save you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I couldn't save you from the shadows. I couldn't."